have you thought about killing yourself?
I have not.
Have you seen that thought in the distance?
I am fortunate that has not come to my mind, and I have not seen it even in the distance. And in some ways, I've wondered if that's made me. Am I a less, effective psychiatrist because of that? I've felt everything stripped away. I've been at the lowest of the low, and yet that
there's still hope. There's a light of hope still at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
So you've never lost, even for brief moments, that.
I never did.
I
don't know why.
You don't know why.
There was no reason.
You don't know why.
No reason to feel hope at that moment, honestly.
So it was just a light without reason.
Yeah, that's right.
What wisdom do you draw from that time? So first of all, you said something funny, which is, I wonder if that it's somehow not having thoughts of suicide limits your capacity to truly understand somebody who is having those thoughts. So how many demons must a psychiatrist have in order to be a good psychiatrist?
Yeah. This is a really interesting question. I think everybody knows, and I can say this, that psychiatrists can be a little unusual. We think about ourselves, right? We think about our brains. That may be one reason why we become psychiatrists, is we think, oh, that's interesting going on in there. What's that about? So a little introspective, a little introverted, maybe, and that's what can make us good when we're good, but also that may select for people who have some unusual aspects. But you don't have to have all of them. There's a lot that can go wrong in the psychiatric realm. I think having some of it, but not all of it, is enough. You get to see how low things can get. You can get you get empathy from that, even if the symptoms are not the same.
Just empathy for struggle, for suffering.
That's right.
Do you yourself have to practice observing triggers, just as a human operating in this world?
I've definitely those skills that have come from therapy. I've found them useful. Yeah. If I notice that we've all been through experiences where we wonder, oh, I got really mad in that interaction. Why did I get that mad? Yeah, sure, maybe I could have been irritated, but man, why did I?
Yeah.
And then thinking about it and realizing, okay, back up here, think about the broader context. Think about how that relates to prior events in my life. Okay, yeah. So this is a thing for me. When something of this class happens, then it triggers me. So going forward, I'm going to be aware of that. And I've definitely used that, because it's you don't want to be out of control of those emotions. You want to identify them. You want to know where they come from, and you want to head them off as a civilized human being living on this earth, trying to get along with other people. You want to understand those moments.
Let me return to Robin Williams for a second, and looking at Robin Williams, the actor, the human, and because you mentioned for depression you can have everything going well, and I think there's just famous cases of just public figures, because a lot of people know them, where they suffer quietly, and it seems like from the outside perspective that they have everything going for them, that they're at top of their career. Two people that come to mind are Robin Williams and Anthony Bourdain. What insight do you have in why either of those have taken? Why Robin Williams, a comedian, one of sort of the most jolly humans? Obviously, there was always the darkness that he was channeling in order to present the happiness, but it feels like that realness is only possible when you're deeply self-honest and analytical, and then if you're deeply self-honest, you're going to realize that there's a lot of beautiful things about life that you can discover, and if you do that, how can you possibly then take your own life? I mean, you go through all of these thoughts, and I think a lot of people really loved Robin Williams, which is why it was really difficult to see him, how can even Robin Williams take his own life? So I don't know if there's something to be said about the nature of depression from just looking at his case.
I think the action of suicide is not well understood. It doesn't always, although often is correlated with depression. There are cases of suicide where there is not clear depression. That's in the minority.
By the way, if I just look, because you said it's so interesting, action of suicide, because there's also thoughts of suicide,
That's right.
and probably they're probably somewhat understood, but it's an interesting, because you can think of suicide, if you have suicidal ideation, you can think of that for so many reasons,
That's right.
and the, I mean, thoughts sometimes, like painful thoughts, angry thoughts, or thoughts in general, can be very different. Like fantasies, for example, you can fantasize, like sexual fantasies. You can fantasize. I was just for humor's sake wanted to mention stuff, but then people will think I'm serious. So I'm not going to mention anything. But sexual fantasies, and then I know there's people that have sexual fantasies and they don't want to actually do that in real life. That sexual fantasy serves some kind of purpose in imagination only. And in that same way, suicide might serve a purpose in imagination only, is very unlikely to lead to action. And yet there's other thoughts that maybe are more amorphous that do lead to action.
Mm.
And that leap, oh boy, that's a fascinating, and that's such a philosophically powerful thought to not exist.
Right.
Like that question, that's this, is it Sartre or Camus? Well, the myth of Sisyphus, Camus, who says, like, basic question of why live?
Right.
It's a good question.
Yeah, right. So that's a great question, actually. And there are other related questions. Some people may have the thought of suicide because there seems no point, there's no joy in life. That's one reason that some people can put forward. Sometimes it's not just the absence of joy, there's an active pain, an active psychic pain in some people. And that the inescapability of that is enough to drive the thoughts of suicide. And then there are interpersonal and cultural reasons as well that can show up. But this act of ending of the self is, in all these cases, there's no real way to study this in animals. No other animal, as far as we know, that we can study has this concept of, this is myself, the situation is not tolerable, therefore I will end the self. To our knowledge, this is not something that can be studied in other animals. So it remains this very poorly understood action. And in predicting it, so what do we do as psychiatrists? We have this challenge. People come to the emergency room, they say they're suicidal, or their friends say they're suicidal, or they've taken some action that didn't lead to death. What do we do? Well, there's a whole range of options. Was it a suicidal gesture in the sense of not intending death, or was the intent death? And if it was the intent was death, what were the reasons? Are the reasons transient? Are they gone now? What's the probability that it'll be repeated? So we do all these things just to decide what sort of treatment should be carried out, but nowhere is there a deep understanding of the biology of the cells and circuits and activity patterns that underlie the action to end the self. It's this frustrating thing. It's so timely. It's so common. It shows up in veterans. It shows up in kids. It shows up in people at every stage of life. And yet we're very bad at understanding it, and we're relatively poor at predicting it. And our tools are not very powerful. We can put people in a locked unit. We can give them care, therapy for a while. At some point, we release them, and there's only so much we can do. It's one of the most frustrating things, the suffering that is linked to suicidality.
But it is a decision, and it is an action. And if you look at optogenetics, you should be able to one day sort of understand the dynamics of such weighty decisions.
The individual causes, then, if someone is anhedonic, if there is no joy in life, that very likely is addressable by optogenetics. We know how to turn that dial very robustly in animals. The motivation to overcome challenges, that we have some hope of understanding. Psychic pain, internal negative states, we have actually a handle on that as well. There's a structure in the brain called the habenula and some linked structures around it that seems to generate this negative internal state. It's active when a state of acute disappointment, acute outcomes that go wrong, not as expected. Moments of unexpected pain. The habenula is there. It seems it's active to report on internal negativity with its action. And so you could imagine strategies to target this brain structure that might have the effect of reducing psychic pain, reducing the negativity of internal states. That is a very concrete hope. It's precise, it's anatomical. Optogenetics has given us all the firm foundation we need to go after that question. So I think there is hope. If you look at the individual causes, the individual symptoms relating to suicide.
And then it's like a puzzle. You put together the puzzle pieces. By the way, I do think my habenula is very functioning very actively. And I wonder if it's like because you can also learn to channel these things, right? Some of the things we suffer from, I mean, there's degrees of suffering, can be a source of progress and personal growth and development and all those kinds of things. I mean, what is it? Nietzsche suffered from stomach issues. I wonder if he's written some of those things, if his stomach was all great.
Right.
I mean, I kind of think that a difficult life in some form, you get to choose in some regard, and some you don't. The difficulties you have and the ones you do have, it's nice to use if possible. Sometimes it's nice to treat, sometimes it's just nice to use.
Well, the way you phrase it, I think you're using it. I could be wrong, but if you phrase it in this semi-humorous way about your habenula, it seems to me that you're using that to good effect. Now, but one never really knows what someone else's internal state is. As I look at you, I don't know the depths of what's going on, and it's possible that it's a much harder situation in there.
Yes. So I actually worry about this a lot. So I'm extremely self-critical, like in the privacy of my own mind, which is an interesting thing when you get to meet the internet, and the internet will tell you suck. But for now, this is what I worry about, and I'm very paying attention. For now, it's really, I just have this like very negative voice, but that voice seems to be very useful for productivity.
Yes.
And so I channel it.
Yes.
I just put it on the table and let that voice like talk to me. But I'm like monitoring that voice, because looking at Robin Williams, you get older, your brain changes, or like and then that voice can now all of a sudden grow.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And then where you can't control it as much, you have to be very careful with these kinds of things.
So you're very right about that. So my negativity, I have this, I never think I've done enough is sort of where my negativity comes from inside. I never think that I've met the potential of the moment. I haven't made the most of the opportunities that are available. Still early. I haven't, progressed as far as I should. And exactly as you're saying, that works for a while. But then what happens as you get later in life and there's less runway to, fix that. And then maybe then that negative voice is a problem.
But also at that point, the negative voice starts having more and more of a point. So when you're being very successful, it's easy to be like, no, okay, well, like, because later in life, you're really literally just sitting there on a rocking chair doing nothing, and then it's or maybe any kind of tragedy happens, loss of a loved one,
That's right.
Loss of a job, or you get screwed over in some kind of way. I don't know those, and then all of a sudden the negative voice is just you and the negative voice for days and days and days.
And so I don't know to go back to your example of Robin Williams, I don't know what was going on inside him. I don't know the nature of his internal state. Was it active psychic pain that finally?
May I interrupt to just say that Sergey posted an examination of Robin Williams' brain tissue suggested that he suffered from, quote, diffuse Lewy body dementia, LBD. Depression is a symptom of LBD, and it's not about psychology. It's rooted in neurology. This is words from Sergey. His brain was falling apart.
Yeah. Lewy body dementia, this is a very interesting neurological disorder where, among other things, there's neuron death, indeed. So you've got frank neuron loss. It's not just a matter of some long-standing psychic pain, but you've got a progressive loss. And so clearly you've got a situation where he could have finally reached a point where the balance that he'd worked out between negativity and positivity was disrupted due to loss. The wrong cells died. The wrong projections were cut by the Lewy body dementia. Certainly dopamine neurons die in Lewy body dementia. Those are neurons that give rise to much of the feelings of reward and pleasure that we experience, among other roles. So clearly, in his case, there could have been a very concrete cellular neurological issue that was progressive and pushed him to that point.
But what were you about to make a point about broader, that if there isn't not a neurological degeneration?
Yeah. So in his case, not knowing that, it could have been simply that, let's say he had an internal psychic pain state, and he was in sort of a compensated mode for much of his life, able to generate enough joy from his comedy and his social interactions, but eventually later in life, those things drop away, the balance shifts. You get tired of fighting the pain for that long, and then so you've got this time-dependent non-stationarity that happens, and then the same symptom becomes no longer tolerable in the end.